The interpretation of accounts question from the 2017 paper, it's JB PLC. The first notes ask is to find the closing stock if the rate of stock turnover is 10 based on average stock. So we need to find the closing stock. If we look in the profit and loss or in the balance sheet, we're not told what closing stock is. So we need to find closing stock. How do we find closing stock? Well, I have the average stock formula. It's opening stock plus closing stock divided by 2 equals average stock. I don't know, I know opening, I don't know my closing, and my answer here is average stock. How am I going to find that? Well, the rate of stock turnover is 10 based on average stock, so that's a separate formula. And I know the answer to that formula is cost of sales divided by average stock is equal to times. I know the answer to that formula is 10 times. So I can use this formula to find what average stock is. Then I can put average stock back in here along with opening stock and find what closing stock is. So you just have to play around with questions like these, find out what you have, what formula can be used to find out maybe something else, and then bring it back into this one so you can find closing stock. So if I deal with this formula, my cost of sales is 565,000. Don't know average stock, but I know the answer is 10 times because we are told so here. The rate of stock turnover is 10. The average stock works out to be 56,500. If I put that back up into my formula here as my answer, I get my opening stock plus closing divided by 2 is equal to 56,500. Therefore, my closing stock is equal to 40,000. End of that question. So again, quickly how to answer it. You're told that it's to find closing stock, and they more or less give you a hint. The rate of stock turnover is 10 based on average stock. So this is my rate of stock turnover formula. I find out average stock, and then once because I have this number 10, then once I have the average stock here, I just plug that in. The second one we're asked to get is the dividend yield. Dividend yield formula is DPS divided by share price. I don't know my dividend per share yet, so I must work that out. The formula for that is here. Total price, total dividend minus preference dividend divided by number of ordinary shares. I don't know my preference dividend. How do I work that out? Well, I have 150,000 preference shares at 5%. If I multiply that out, I get 7,500. Now I have my preference dividend, and I know the rest of the information. I can work out my DPS. So my total dividend I get up here to be 50,000. I have 50,000. I minus my 7,500 preference dividend, which I've worked out, and I divide it by my number of ordinary shares up here, 450,000. That gives me a dividend per share of 9.44 cent. I put that back into my formula here, and I divide it by my share price, which I'm given in the question to be 135 cent. The share price is always in cent. So to finish that off, I can get my dividend yield. 9.44 is my dividend per share. Share price we were given as 135 cent. Multiplied by 100 over 1 in 2 decimal places is 6.99 cent. Again, 2 decimal places because they told us to do so. Don't always assume that it'll always be 2. Some year they might change it to 1 or to 3. Earnings per share is the third one. The formula for this is net profit minus preference dividend divided by number of ordinary shares. My net profit is 114,000. I can see that here. My preference dividend I worked out above to be 7,500. My number of ordinary shares is 450,000. Again, that can be seen in the question. What am I looking for? Sorry. Number of ordinary shares can see in the question here, 450,000. 114,000 minus 7,500 divided by 450 works out, multiplied by 100 over 1. 2 decimal places, it works out to be 23.67 cent. Fourth formula. So we're asked to get the return on equity funds. So return on equity funds. As you can see here, I have something else written up there because if you look back at your formula list, at the profitability at the top, I have return on shareholders' equity. It's the same thing as return on equity funds. Just to confuse you, they can ask you this in a different way. Next year might be return on shareholders' equity. This year was return on equity fund. Nevertheless, the formula is net profit after preference dividend divided by equity funds multiplied by 100 over 1 is equal to percent. So I know my net profit to be 114,000. My preference dividend I've worked out to be 7,500. And my equity funds I can work out. My equity funds is my ordinary shares plus my profit and loss balance. These are my equity funds. This was previously written as total capital employed minus total debt. I just changed it to equity funds as that's the same thing. Total capital employed would be 879,000. And total debt would be 200 and 150,000 here, being debentures and preference shares. So you can do either or, but I've just left it as equity funds now, as it might be a little easier to follow. Equity funds again is my ordinary shares, plus P and L balance. So I can multiply that out then. Below, so I have my answer to my net profit is 114,000. I have my preference dividend is minus 7,500, and 450,000 is my ordinary shares. My profit and loss balance is 79,000. I put all those in and I get 20.13%. Trick to this here is finding the formula. It's return on shareholders' equity is return on equity funds. After that, you just plug in the information that you have. My final one that I'm asked to get here is my interest cover. Interest cover formula is net profit before interest divided by interest equals times. So my net profit is 114,000. My interest is 16,000. I can see that up here. Interest of 16,000. Therefore, my net profit before I took away the interest has to be 114 plus 16. Because we had 114, I had to take away the interest. I'm now going to add it back to get my net profit before interest. 114 plus 16,000 divided by 16,000 is 8.13 times.